welcome to another edition of Buzzwords and Music. Tonight we have a very special guest with us, me. And we have with us Jared Simmons, who is a fabulous person. He's a very good friend. He's a piano student. He coaches business. He does many things, and he's agreed to put up with me for whatever amount of time we have here. And I've just been getting a lot of questions about, well, you know, you interview all these other people, who are you? So I thought this would be a good idea to maybe have Jared ask me a few things, shed a little light on me, and then I don't have to do this anymore. So, Jared, I'm going to turn the mic over to you. You got that lovely big red microphone.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And,
Let's put it to use.
I just have all these keyboards, so I can't compete.
Well, I'll do what I can with my one little microphone.
All right. I've got one too. So,
well, thanks, Buzz, for allowing me to join you and ask some questions that I know I'm excited to hear the answers to. So we'll just dive right in.
All right.
All right.
You've probably heard most of the stuff anyway, but
it's always good stuff. It's always good stuff. So how let's kind of start at the beginning. We know where you are, a bit about where you are today. How did you get started in music?
I very early age. I was interested in music probably from about age 3, and constantly listening to records. I had my own little record player and stuff, and my dad would come home from he owned a restaurant, and he'd come home for the restaurant like at 2 or 3 in the morning, and all he would hear is this little creaking. I'd be in my rocking chair listening to records, just no volume, just off of the needle. That's how dedicated I was.
So you were listening to basically the direct vibrations from the needle, not
when you put the needle on the record, especially in the way they were back in the day, it's not like having a Harman Kardon system or anything. But when you would put the needle on, you could hear it just wasn't amplified.
Right. Yeah.
So
wow.
So that, you know, I was always drawn to music. And then my cousin was a piano player. Well, he was taking piano because at this time we're like 4 and 5 years old. And I would always watch him when I could be around. I'd watch him practice, and I go, "What are these things?" And he'd go, "Notes." And I was like, "What do they do?" And so he would explain all that stuff to me. So I was always taking it in. I just never had an instrument that I was expressing with.
So at that point, you're listening to records and watching someone play the piano. You're not. I'm not
doing anything. I have air guitar at home.
Got it.
You know, I actually at that time I fancied myself a singer, so I would sing along with Davy Crockett and the Battle of 1814 or whatever the popular kids songs of the day were.
Yeah, classics.
Yeah.
Cool. So you're 5 years old. So that's kind of where you're at right here. What to take us up through elementary school and high school.
I mean, you know, elementary school. The most musical talent I showed was, I think they still do this now. At some point, you had to take flutophone, like a little recorder, and you know they hand them all out, which God forbid they do that nowadays, but they'd hand them all out and maybe do like an alcohol dip. And
right.
So that, you know, because you don't know the last class that had it. And I was very good at that. So, you know, I think it was known that I had some musical talent.
Okay.
I just didn't know where to channel it at the time. So, you know, I messed around with guitar for years, like when I was in high school, but I never really felt a connection to it.
Right.
So when I started applying for colleges, because I was writing music at the time. I started, because of my cousin, I started understanding notes and how notes were put together, chords, nothing deep, but some fairly cool stuff for a 15, well, at that time I'd be about 17 or 18. And, I would get other people to play stuff for me so I could make sure I had it right.
So you would write out the chart, and then hand it to somebody to play on piano or guitar or whatever.
Or whatever, yeah.
So you could write charts in guitar as well?
Well, I mean, I could write chords.
Yeah, chords. Yeah, that's
play this chord.
Yeah. Now,
I wasn't doing tabs or anything. I was never, I still can't do that stuff.
Now, how did you decide, so you're writing things out. Where did those things come from?
What, the ideas?
Like you're a teenager. Where are these things come? Where's your inspiration coming from?
My early inspiration came, when I was 10 years old, I discovered Miles Davis, totally by accident. My mother belonged to the Columbia Record Company. They would send an album every month. Or you wrote they sent you a form that saying, no, don't send this month's selection. She didn't return it in time, and they sent her Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. So I put that on, and I had no idea what I was listening to, but it sounded cool. It didn't sound like the Captain Kangaroo theme song anymore.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I was hearing music that had no relation in my life whatsoever.
Yeah.
My dad loved big band, and my mother was an opera buff.
Okay, so that's like Tommy Dorsey and
Dorsey,
both the Dorsey brothers, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So he was all into that, and of course Frank Sinatra.
Of course. He was with whose band was he with? He was with one of the Dorsey brothers bands.
That's what I was thinking. Wasn't it Tommy Dorsey?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
I used to, needle my dad and call him Frank Not So Hatra. Because, it's your dad's music.
Of course.
So, at 11, 12, 13 years old, you're rebelling.
Of course. Yeah, you can't give him any credit for his musical taste at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
So, basically in the 60s, and especially the very early 70s when I was in high school, I was hearing, all the popular stuff of the day. You would hear everything from the Beatles to, God, my mind's a blank right now. It's because I just watched that McCartney thing. So but there were dozens of, just great groups. I mean, you had people like Sam and Dave were big, all the Motown stuff.
Yeah,
Stax, William Bell, Al Bell, all that stuff. I guess kind of had an influence, but the first few real kind of pieces I was writing were semi-classical, but I'll tell you what, you wouldn't hear it in my music now, but Frank Zappa was kind of an early influence.
Frank Zappa?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I love Frank Zappa.
Yes.
He was one of the few, records that I would go out and get. As soon as an album by Frank came out, I was going to get it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, so some of my music had some comedy elements to it, but it also had some pretty cool stuff. So when I went to Hampton, when I went there for college. And when I went to apply, of course, they told me, well, you've got to learn an instrument because they had to bring in one of the piano teachers to play my pieces.
Oh,
because I
Gotcha.
couldn't play them.
So at your audition to get into college, to get in the music program, you had your score, but you couldn't yourself play it.
Right. They had to
Okay.
go get
Gotcha.
Consuela Moorhead because she was the jazz teacher.
Yeah.
And because the first couple of the things I brought in there were very like Herbie Hancock, but just very ostinato type things over one, like a repeating bass line
Mhm.
with chords and then a melody. And I couldn't play any of that.
Okay. Gotcha.
So they told me, look, you can get here. You just need to take piano in your senior year of high school.
So you got into college, into a music program before you learned to play the piano.
Right. But I was told I needed that to
Right.
come in the fall.
Yeah. Okay, so it's almost like a contingency sort of thing, like pending you learning the piano. Okay.
Right.
Got it.
So, because they gave me a theory test, and I was able to place it immediately right into third year theory. So, and they wanted me.
Right. Yeah.
The woman I referenced earlier, Mrs. Moorhead, her brother was Bill Lee, who was a bass player with the New York Bass Violin Choir, whose son is actually Spike Lee.
Oh.
But that family has a very musical heritage and very strong musical heritage. And I wanted to study with her because, she was it.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
I went home and said, I got to learn piano. So I used to work for my dad, so I had money, but I didn't have enough for a piano. So my parents said, you pick out the piano, you pay for half, we'll pay for the other half.
Oh, nice.
So I did. Started out with a Baldwin Hamilton, and a good, respectable first piano.
Solid.
My mother somehow found this teacher, a man named Pat Curtis, who was he was the perfect teacher for me because, he knew his theory, he knew how to play piano, blah, blah, blah. The first time he came over, he gave me one of these little John Thompson books.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, oh God, this kid's like 17, 18 years old and he wants to learn piano. And so he's like, well, work on these two pieces here. And when I come back next week, we'll see how you're doing. Well, when he came back the next week, I had already done the whole book.
The whole book?
Yeah. I mean, you've seen a John Thompson book. So he threw it on the floor and said, okay, you're serious.
Yeah.
And from that time on, he started working me like I was a pianist and introduced me to, in 6 months, had me playing Bach two-part inventions, a Chopin nocturne, a Chopin prelude, some Debussy. I mean, he just, and he would help me with the jazz side of things because he was a jazz pianist.
Right.
Wow. So, and I would be his last student of the day. So he would come over and give me my lesson and then go, let's do a theory lesson. And so sometimes, he would stay for dinner.
Oh, yeah.
So he was ideal. And I found out years later, he was Bruce Hornsby's piano teacher.
Wow.
So good on Bruce. That explains a lot.
Yeah.
So that's what got me to college. I spent 2 years. I went through the music program and I was like, I don't really want a degree in music so that I can teach or whatever. I want to get out there and be a musician.
Right.
I want to starve like all my friends.
Live the life.
Yeah. And boy, was that a mistake. No. By the time I finished, I started immediately playing in bands. And I really wasn't that good, but I had some facility. I understood chords. I could pick out things. So, people would hire me. And then I got with a group of musicians many who I'm still in touch with today, who we just kind of formed a unit and we played constantly. So
kind of like your own little wrecking crew.
Yeah, kind of, except we weren't doing it for anybody else, just us. But it was good because we would practice. We didn't have jobs. God forbid that.
Yeah.
If you're gonna live the life, do it all the way.
That's right.
So we would rehearse like 7 or 8 hours a day, and
together.
Yeah. Wow. And that's not counting your individual.
Yeah, exactly.
So I started getting decent at piano pretty quickly. You have to.
Yeah. And you learn in a special. I would imagine you learn in a special kind of way. When you're learning together with other musicians.
Yes, very interactive. You start knowing each other very well, and it's just much easier to communicate. And since you're learning material together, it's just an easy process.
And I imagine learning, you probably learn to listen, to each other and hear where you're going. If I sit at a piano and practice for an hour, I hear myself. But if you play 8 hours with 3, 4, 5 other musicians,
everybody's part.
Everybody's part, and where people are headed, and when to listen, what to listen out for.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the biggest things you can do as a musician is learn to listen. Too many people are, hey, dig me, check out what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And they're not listening to what their fellow bandmates are doing, whether it's someone who you play with every night, or if it's a one-nighter and you're playing with a brand new rhythm section. So, I did that gig thing for several years after college, and then I moved to Georgia.
Gotcha.
I wasn't intending to come here. That was totally by accident as well.
Right.
I was here for the weekend, and the day I got here, there was a group in the park that was playing called Life Force. I had just left the band I had in Virginia. I just left was called Life Force. So I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. So I went up and introduced myself after their set. And the piano player goes, hey, I've got a gig that I can do Friday and Saturday. If you're not busy, can you do it? And I'm like, I guess. So he's like, they got a piano, don't worry about it. So I was like, all right. So I show up, and it's this place called Walter Mitty's, which has been gone for a while now, but it was the premier jazz spot in the city.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I mean, and on any given night, somebody like Herbie Hancock or George Benson, Stevie Wonder, anybody could walk in. Fortunately, none of those people walked in when I was playing, because I wasn't that schooled at jazz.
Yeah.
I knew the chords, but soloing, no, it was not. Playing bebop was not my thing.
But that's a great place to learn, I would imagine.
It was very good. And the piano player came in that Saturday night and said, hey, I'm going to keep this gig down the street for a while. Why don't you keep this? And I was like, I don't live here. And the drummer who I've told you about, Jan Rico, who passed not long ago, even almost a year ago, the drummer just goes, you do now, okay? So I was like, well, I guess I better find a place to live. So that's how I ended up here.
And when was that? That was
79.
79.
42
Amazing.
years ago.
Amazing.
I was just a little snot-nosed 26-year-old punk.
Yeah, well, you didn't know that then, did you? I'm sure.
What?
I'm sure
that
you.
I was I was
That
a
you
punk.
didn't know anything. Yeah, that you were.
Oh yeah, no,
punk.
no.
Yeah.
I acted like I knew everything, and quickly found out I knew nothing.
Oh man, that's amazing. So you're born and raised in New York.
Actually, I was born in Virginia.
Born in Virginia. Wow. Okay. Raised in New York. Petersburg, Virginia. Raised in New
Colonial
York.
Heights, if you want to get it even further down. But yes, and then we divided our time between Virginia and New York.
Ah, okay. Gotcha. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. And and then back to school in Virginia,
Yes,
Hampton.
that's
And
when I went to
then-
Hampton.
And then now we're in Atlanta in 79.
We're in Atlanta in 1979. I've got a prestigious gig that lasted about 3 weeks before the other piano player decided he was going to come back.
He just took it back.
Yeah, I mean, it was his
Yeah.
gig. So
Yeah.
so I started I was like, oh, what do I do now? So I took a job at Wendy's. I was the prep guy that would come in, in the morning and get everything ready. But that didn't last long. I was working the window one day, and this guy comes up and he wanted if he had some hamburgers for his dog. And, I love dogs, and he had a beautiful lab. And I was like, yeah, hang on. So I got him. I actually gave him fresh meat. I didn't get here's some of the old stuff.
Right.
And we started talking, and he was a guitar player.
Wow.
And he lived right down the street from me. So we started hanging out, and he was a fantastic player. And we just really connected. So he's like, I'm working with this guy. I got some gigs you can have.
Wow.
And
What are the odds of that?
Yeah, it was kind of cool.
Unbelievable.
But the gigs that he had were all these 3-chord rock songs that I had never played before. I'd never done that type of music. So I remember the first night. Now, first of all, the bass player didn't show up. We're in Gainesville, Georgia, doing this gig, and the bass player decided he wasn't going to come. So they were like, well, you have to kick bass. I was like, well, I've never done that. Yeah, you'll be fine. So now I'm having to kick bass on songs that I have no recollection of. I barely know the chord changes. I'm pretty much following.
Right.
But I'm getting through. I'm doing it. And by about the second or third song in, the guitar player walks over to me and he's like, hey, man, you see your little finger? And I was like, yeah. He's like, get it the hell out of there. I'm playing Bob Seger and putting extensions on it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because I want it to be hip.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that, I started just using 3 fingers.
Yeah.
I'll act like I don't know anything. I'll use these 3. And so we did that for a while. And then he was like, hey, man, I know this drummer. Let's have a jazz trio. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. If it's a jazz trio, where's the bass player? Well, you can kick bass. I was like, man, I can't kick bass songs like that. So he's like, well, I've already got us a gig, so you kind of have to. So I was like, oh, geez. So I'm trying to figure out how am I going to do this? Because I have no idea how a bass player walked through changes.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I took my mini mode and I rolled off all the high end. And I just got this sound. And I played shapes all night. I go, no notes, and my hand would just be random. And I'd have people come up to me go, man, you're killing that left hand with the chords and everything. And I was like, yeah, well, we bad.
I love it. Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I love it. And that the other thing is confidence. You look the part and you're playing it.
Yeah, I don't know how confident it was. It was just somebody's got to do it.
Yeah.
And so this guitar player, he had some decent little connections. He worked with this producer in town. And he was like, hey, man, I can get you in on some sessions. I was like, great. Because he and we started becoming inseparable. I got offered a gig at Bert's place. And, because I don't drive, it's hard for me to get places. So, and I wanted to keep playing with Nick, the guitar player. And I said, look, just come and do the gig. Whatever they pay me, I'll split, so that we can play together.
Right.
And so that's what we did. We took the one paycheck and split it between the two of us.
Wow.
And did that gig. And then he knew this producer in town. I won't mention his name because it was not a pleasant experience. Where it started out pretty well, but I got a read on him very quickly that he only knew, he didn't know how to tell you to do anything. He just knew when he heard you do what he wanted.
Oh, one of those.
And sometimes we'd spend hours doing stuff, and he would call us all the time. So after a while, I got tired of experimenting. So I would say, what if we tried this and this and this? And he's like, yeah, man, go for it. And we'd do it. And he'd be sitting in the chair, just, yeah, that's it. And after a while, I felt like I was handling the sessions.
Right. Yeah.
Unofficially.
Yeah.
So he kind of saw that, I was a take charge kind of person. So he would actually go, I'm not going to be at tomorrow's session. Can you run it?
Oh, wow.
I was like, yeah, okay. So I started doing that a little bit. And then I started, a couple of friends would have records they want to do. And I go, yeah, I know a good studio you can do this at, and blah, blah, blah. And, I would kind of help them through the whole thing.
Okay. Now,
go ahead.
But at this point, you're just kind of helping people through the process. You're not formally in the chair.
No,
okay.
I mean, technically I am, but A, I'm not getting paid for it.
Oh, okay.
And B, because I just did it because it was a great experience and I loved it.
Right.
My whole approach to producing was very simple. It's like the little kid who's goes to the garage band to hear a band practice in the garage going, oh, I like that. No, I don't like that. I can guide you if you need it.
Yeah.
But I do like to give artists, all the room in the world until it's time to pull the reins back. And, but that didn't come till much later. I landed this bass player I worked with. I had a different band at this time, and we were fairly popular in the city. We were called Central Park. Okay. And then later we became Ice Nine. And nice. The bass player, his brother used to be Curtis Mayfield's bass player.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, yeah, I got to go over to Kurt's place. Do you want to come with me? I was like, yeah. So we go over there, and, I meet Curtis Mayfield, and, I'm like, hey, how's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, come on in here, Cat. We're going to cut a couple of songs. And I was like, really? And so we sat down, we cut 2 songs. I'm still not really putting any of this together. Yeah. And then he goes, let me go out there and put a scratch vocal down. And as soon as he went out in the room and started singing, I just looked at LeBron, the bass player, and I went, that's Curtis Mayfield. That was the voice.
Yeah, exactly.
And the next thing you know, I think this was like 83.
Yeah.
Because Curtis had just moved to Atlanta himself.
Oh, okay.
He moved his record label, Curtom, here. And So I started doing sessions for Curtis. One of the things that we would do is he wanted to recreate a lot of his stuff so he could own the masters.
Oh, right.
Because
Right.
he's from that
Smart.
era where they took everything and
Yeah. 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 Now, so do you think that was kind of a quasi audition for you, or you think it just kind of came into?
no,
What do you think was?
I think we hit it off real well.
Mm-hmm.
He came out. We were playing one night at a Holiday Inn of all places, and he came out and heard the band. And 2 days later, I'm on the phone complaining with the bass player going, I'm really sick of playing these little nickel and dime gigs. And, it seems like we're just beating and while I'm talking to him, the phone whole call waiting comes in.
Yeah.
And it's Curtis going, y'all get your passports. We're going to Europe, cats. And he gave me a number of a guy to call, his manager at the time. And I did. And it was real. He was, he had actually fired his son and his band. Long story there. His son had staged a walkout.
What?
Yeah, because they every now and then when you're of that stature, you're going to get like a TV show that goes, Curtis, we'd love to have you on the TV show. We don't have a budget.
Yeah.
And the musicians, a lot of times would be like, oh, it's my day off. It's not benefiting me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what his son did. So Curtis wasn't one to look back too much. So next thing you know, I'm practicing to go on tour with Curtis.
Wow.
He would do all these songs and I would just be like, you wrote that? You wrote that? I was just shocked.
How would that work? I mean, I can't imagine playing with somebody of that stature. Like, does it take a minute to kind of get over, that's Curtis Mayfield, to kind of get back and get locked into things, or do you kind of fall into that?
I think you just kind of fall into it because at that point I'd been doing enough studio work with him.
Okay.
Where I kind of knew what was, and I don't remember if that was before or after, because he was commissioned to do the I'm Gonna Get You Sucker movie.
Mm-hmm.
And long story there, but you go through all that, you get to know somebody really well.
Yeah.
And Curtis was just such an easygoing person.
Mm-hmm.
There would be times where he would remind you who was boss.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody pushes.
Right.
And and that's his gig.
Yeah.
But I used to call him my dad away from home.
Mm-hmm.
And he liked that because he says there's not enough daddy boys in the world.
That's true. You don't hear that very often.
Right.
Yeah.
So we started touring with him, and his manager, I came to find out, owned a record label.
Oh.
And his manager approached me one day. I think we were somewhere in England, and he goes, would you like to get some fish and chips, some real greasy food?
Nice.
And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? So, I'm all about the grease.
Yeah.
So we go, and he says, have you ever produced a record before? So I kind of lied. I said, yeah.
That's the only answer to
that's
that
the only answer. He goes, well, I own a record label, and we have an artist, you may have heard of him, Billy Paul. And I was like, oh yeah, me and Mrs. Jones. And he's like, yeah. He's like, we just signed him, and I think you would do a great job producing them.
That was your first? That was
my first record. And I got to tell you, I really thought that was going to be my last record, because the only thing that was worse than my production was Billy. That was at a time where he was always very coked out.
Oh no.
It was very tough working with him.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't have mattered if I'd have produced a musical masterpiece. He wouldn't have been able to do it. And so his vocals complemented my lack of experience. So I was shocked that I didn't, get tossed out.
Yeah. Well, but so I would imagine it's more than just production to producing, right? I mean, someone who's got those kind of habits is probably difficult to manage.
Production, I always tell people, the music part should be the easiest part. You have to be a psychologist, a parent, a dinner companion. Some artists, you have to be their drug dealer or at least their connection. There's so many hats that you have to wear, and you have to know when to put them on and when to take them off at each turn. Some artists are very easy to work with. Pianist Bob Thompson, who I've shared some of his music with you before. He's going to be on next week, as a matter of fact. Amazing guy. Yeah. The first record I produced on him, I was intimidated because it was Bob Thompson, and this was a jazz record. So now I was, I better get this right. Right. And he was recording one of my songs, and they'd done about 2 or 3 songs, and I just never said anything. I was just like, yeah, that's good. That's good. They were almost self-producing because I was so intimidated. But when he got to my song, it wasn't quite the way I wanted it. So I spoke up. So I went out and I was like, Bob, I'd like to hear, how about doing this on the bridge or whatever? And he was like, oh, yeah, I feel you there. And, totally did it. Wow. And his whole band was, so all of a sudden I started getting this little boost of confidence. And then you couldn't shut me up. Yeah. But we hit it off very well right from note one. And it's really cool how your touring was like the intro to your production. And the touring was the intro to my whole career. Yeah. I can call all this other stuff part of the career, but when I basically got hired with Ichiban Records in the mid to late 80s, right up until 2000, I had a good 12, 13-year run there. And amazing. Got to work with some really unique artists and extremely talented, some that were not so, but you made the best of it. Right. Yeah. But most of the artists, I don't think I can name more than 3, and I won't name. But I don't think there was more than 3 artists that I was just like, and I probably never even listened to their record since it was made. Wow, that's a pretty good percentage. Over that. And that's not saying I enjoyed the albums. Right. There were, because anytime you make something, later on down the road, it's like anything else. You hear, oh, I could have done this, but I didn't know that then. Right. Yeah. It's a product of where you are in the moment. Exactly. Yeah. It's what I tell my artists when they go back and listen to something. I'm like, look, that's a snapshot of where you were at that given time. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, how did you weave touring and producing into, like, it just, to me, those seem like things that would be hard to balance? They could be, because the owner of the record label was also Curtis's tour manager.
Okay.
He would be like, we're going, that first tour we did, we went out 7 weeks.
Wow.
We did 42 shows in 44 days. We had two days, and I mean, we were cruising. And when we hit that day off, when we came back the next night, it sucked.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, because everything was just so tight.
You got everything dialed in, and you kind of in that routine.
And Curtis used to have these little tells. You could tell when he was going to mess up a section.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes you'd be doing Freddie's Dead and he would go to the bridge too soon. And we would always be there. And after about 3 years, one night he's like, "How do you all know when I'm screwing up, Cat?" And we just laughed because we didn't want to tell him, because then he would start doing it just to start, because that's kind of how Curtis was. He was a good prankster.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So you would go out for 44 days, and then you come back, and the manager would have a
project for
an artist or project, something lined up for you, and then you go out again. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like we were touring, every other month or anything.
Right.
A lot of tours, after a while, even some of the bigger artists will go out for like 3 or 4 weeks at a time and then take a break. Mm-hmm. Because you have a tendency to get on each other's nerves.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Because you're on a bus with these people all day. Yeah. It doesn't matter how comfortable the bus is.
Right.
This is your family. And that's, you can only be with your family.
Right. And you didn't get to choose your family.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you're taking these personalities and just putting them in the mixing pot and going, let's see how this pans out. Yeah. Now, that's one of the reasons why Curtis wanted us, because we were a band already. Mm-hmm. And so we'd already had, we already knew how to fight with each other.
Right. You've been through the growing pains. And,
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. So going out with him opened up a lot of doors for me. Mm-hmm. As you would, imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then that got me to be able to produce and play with people like Benny King, the Shy Lights, the 3 Degrees, who I actually still, when this pandemic's over with, I'll get to go back out.
Right.
But I've done that gig on and off for. I mean, the first time I went with them was 90.
Wow.
I didn't become, but I came back to being a regular in 2006.
Okay.
So they would do 2 tours a year in Japan, and I go with them there. I don't go to Europe with them because they stay over there way too long.
Okay. Yeah.
They'll do 3 months.
Wow, on the road?
Yeah.
Like today, like.
Yeah, they're only working maybe 3 nights a week.
Yeah.
And they'll have like a hotel that they kind of park at.
Right. Oh, I see.
So even when the gig is over, even if they've got to drive an hour and a half, they're going to go back to the same hotel.
Yeah. Okay.
The band has to schlep all their gear. This is another reason why I won't do the gig. I got spoiled with Curtis.
Okay.
I mean, we played the Apollo Theater. They had all my gear set up except a foot pedal. And I saw the foot pedal just sitting there. So I got under the keyboard to plug it in. And there was a guy going, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I just wanted to plug it. I'll do it. That's what I get paid for. You don't touch anything." And, because it's all union.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even plug in the pedal to my keyboard. So yeah, I've been spoiled.
Yeah, that's a whole other level right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. So you said Benny King, the Shy Lights, 3 Degrees.
3 Degrees.
And-
A popular blues artist, Theodis Ealey, who had a big hit with a song called "Stand Up in It." A blues artist out of Houston, Trudy Lynn, and I actually toured with her some.
Trudy Lynn. Okay.
Yeah. Powerhouse singer.
Yeah. So this is now we're talking about 80s, 90s.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Ichiban. For the last 2 years of the company, they were the #1 independent label in the country.
Wow.
And, because we had produced a lot of #1, not a lot, but we originally kind of, the Vanilla Ice record originally came through us.
The
Ice Ice Baby.
Ice Ice Baby?
Yeah.
Wow.
It came through a label out of Texas. We distributed it, but then the orders got too big, and the guy from Texas and Ichiban, they sold it off to SBK. It's like a baseball player being traded down the line.
Yeah.
But there was no way we could print, 11 million copies of a record.
What did you think of that when you first heard it?
I
mean, not from your personal taste, but did you think that was going to be what it became?
No.
It's
No, that's not one that I heard.
Yeah.
The one that I heard, and it's the one that got away, and I let the owner know this every time I see him, is Tag Teams. Whoop, there it is.
Yeah.
I knew it as it was being recorded. I took it to the label. The owner's wife was the one that listened to it and told me I had no business being in A&R, and to take your tag team and go home or whatever.
Yeah.
And I could just kill her for that.
That is that's
and in my dreams I have.
Yeah. That is that would stick.
And then we had Jermaine Dupri come in, and he was doing Crisscross.
Oh, right. Yeah, he came in as a producer.
Yes.
Okay,
he was 17.
He was 17 when he was
17 years old. And this kid had a fantastic work ethic. And I think he was the first hip hop producer. Of course, back then they were all called rap artists and rap producers.
Yeah.
We hadn't sanitized the terminology as much.
Right.
But he was the first producer in that genre that I saw, even though he was working with samples, he would, it was like watching a master chef, how he would put these things together.
Really?
Yeah. And he would always, he would tell the kids to go get lunch somewhere, and he would go in and cut their parts so that they could hear him doing their parts.
Yeah.
He would call me, excuse me, and ask myself or one of the engineers, are these two samples in the same key? He had me play on the record.
Wow.
So, he was very open to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And at that time, that was the first #1 our studio turned out. And
the whole album, it was a #1 album, right?
Yeah, the album was #1, and Jump was just
of course.
So it was the first time I realized there's a whole other breed of production going on, because he brought his own engineer for the mixes. And was this the same guy? No, I'm thinking of another session. Excuse me. But I did start noticing that people that were producing hip hop didn't know all the stuff that, we OGs knew.
Mm-hmm.
A producer, a very famous producer in the EDM world and hip hop,
Right.
came to the studio one time and he asked me if I knew a guitar player to play on a particular song for him. So I was like, oh, yeah, I got somebody, because he wanted somebody really aggressive. So I was like, I got the perfect guy for you.
Yeah.
So I call him up. He comes in. He's got his guitar. He's got a couple of amps. And the engineer goes, well, we won't be needing the amps. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, I got amp simulators. I can just run them into the computer. And I was like, no, dude, you don't get it. He's going to move air.
Yeah.
And
it's going to hit a microphone.
Yeah. And he didn't get that. He's like, well, to be honest with you, I don't even know how to mic a guitar amp. So I didn't send. Our engineer went out and said, I'll set them up for you.
Wow.
Well, the look on his face when the guitar player started playing and he heard the sound that was coming out of the amplifier, you would have thought he just discovered fire. But it was a way they'd never thought to produce.
Yeah.
I did a thing on Twitch tonight, which sadly the OBS was not being as cooperative, so I may rerun it or do it again rather. But I was tracing how recording was done from 4-track to 8-track to 16-track.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you have unlimited tracks.
Right.
Nobody cares about giving a performance. It's, I'll do this, you can fix it, auto-tune me, just cut those notes out, that kind of stuff. And when I would play, like I would use Marvin Gaye, and, you listen to how a band sounds in a room together.
Yeah.
And, or even with the Beatles, and you listen to their background vocals and you're just like, oh my God, those things are spot on. There was no tuning, and they only had 4 tracks. So once they recorded the rhythm track on 2 tracks, they bounced that down to 1 track, and you had to, if you had reverb on it, you were stuck with it. There was no going back. You had to commit every step of the way, and we don't have that now.
How do you think that affects people's ability or skill at making choices?
Quite a bit, because
you always talk about choices and how important choices are.
Absolutely. Yeah. You hear artists. I did a session once with a guitar player who was a very good guitar player around town, and he came in and he started playing, and he got through the first verse and he stopped. I was like, did you break a string? What happened? No, you got enough, just copy and paste it. I was like, no. But that's how modern sessions are done. It's like, come in, play your 2 notes, we'll copy and paste it. And you don't, nobody chooses to actually have a performance anymore. And it's because it's work.
Right.
These things, you've heard me say this, I was not a big fan of the Beach Boys, but when I listened to the acapellas on some of their stuff that Brian Wilson would arrange, these things weren't done in 30 minutes or in 2 takes and, okay, fix it, send you home.
Right.
These were intricate harmonies being sung around a mic. 4 or 5 guys sitting around a mic. They all had to get their part perfectly.
Yeah, and the second chorus sounded a little different from the first chorus.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, and the way I kind of produce around that, when I get a track when I get the stems and it's the same vocal part, I mix it a little differently. I change the blend.
Yeah.
It's very subtle, but it does make a difference.
Good, yeah, makes sense.
So you just don't want, you just don't want everything on endless repeat,
Right. Right.
because that gets old after a while too.
Yeah. Got to give it somewhere to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, so now we're in the thick of your the production and touring era. Uh, so where does teaching come in?
When I first started teaching, it was because the record label closed.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was independent.
Mhm.
So that meant independent also sometimes means you're not working as much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I've never been a big schmoozer.
Mhm.
So I could have had a lot more contacts and stuff than I did, and that's hindsight at this point. But I was like, I need to do something. And production is kind of teaching.
Mhm.
You're teaching an artist how to listen to themselves differently in context with what's around them.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm going to try it. Everybody kept telling me, you're going to hate it. You're going to hate teaching. You're going to get these kids that come in and they're not going to practice and blah, blah, blah. I got to tell you, from the first student on, I loved it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And, and I've grown as a teacher,
Mhm.
And I've made some great friends, yourself
Oh, yeah.
amongst them.
Yeah.
Kid Star,
Mhm.
he started out as a student. And, we've worked together on a few different projects.
Yeah.
And I just really enjoy it.
Yeah. Do you is there a certain type of what's your style? I know your style, but how did you kind of arrive at that? You said you've evolved as a teacher. What does that evolution look like?
I hear so many people, over the years talk about, like I'd be on a gig or something and they go, hey, you play piano so good. I started playing, but I gave it up,
Yeah.
And most of the time it was due to a teacher. Because they were either too strict or maybe not even focused enough, or they didn't recognize what it was the student really wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been my thing, is there are certain things you have to know how to do. There's no getting around them, but there's no reason why you can't have fun doing them. And learn things in the process. So, okay, I need you to be able to play a scale, but I'm going to teach you 6 chords that you can play underneath that scale. So you can actually make music right off the bat. And then, and that's for a beginner. And I try not to use method books. Some students, you need that. They need that structure. But you remember my student, the little kid I had at one point, Max.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who he was 9, I think, when he came, when his dad brought him to me. He had like 4 years of lessons, and he could not play past a book 1 John Thompson, maybe a book 2 John Thompson.
Wow.
And which was just, very simple stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. Well, it came to find that he hated it because he was creative and nobody recognized that he wanted to be creative.
I see.
So I gave him some tools. Because the first week, the second week he came back, he wrote a song. A very valid chord progression.
Wow.
And I don't mean just 1, 4, 5.
Right.
He even had a diminished chord in there, so that he just happened to find on his own. Right. So I played to that strength, and tried to keep engaging him in figuring something out. And then Then he heard Scott Joplin.
Oh, well, I can relate to that.
Yes. And when he heard Maple Leaf Rag, it was all over.
Oh,
Now, I can't play that stuff. So all I could do was teach it to him and tell him when he was playing it right and not playing it right.
Right.
I could tell him the chords and what he was doing. Well, I think I've played you a video of him doing it.
Yeah.
And I mean, first of all, he loves to play fast. So he's definitely playing it faster than Scott Joplin would have approved of.
Yeah. He wrote it on the top of all his music.
Right.
Yeah.
But he just loves to, he's a little show off.
Hey, but listen, if you can play the Maple Leaf Rag at the speed that I've seen him play it, I would play it that fast too, if I could play it.
Exactly. I'd be like, yeah, man, check it out. So, and it's students like him or like yourself working through that Bill Evans,
Mm-hmm.
that just really, that's special to me.
Yeah.
I have another friend, Vince, who I've given lessons to on and off since the mid 80s when I met him. And he still comes over to the house and he'll get a lesson and then we'll go out to eat or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's just like, man, music is so deep. He said, just when I think I have a handle on something, you show me this.
Yeah.
And I'm the same way. I'm discovering new things, every week.
I think that's part of your unique style in my eyes. I've had, my share of teachers, but part of your unique style as a teacher to me is that you're also sharing what you're working on at the same time, and you kind of let it gives you permission to struggle with what you're struggling, me permission to struggle with what I'm struggling with, because you're like, oh, I watched this video on YouTube and it blew my mind. And I'm like, okay, all right. So it's okay that my brain is melting,
Right.
on this other stuff. So
I just have to try and stay one step ahead.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's when you come in and go, no, man, this is how it really is. That's when I'm going to have some issues.
Oh, man.
So I do love teaching.
Yeah. And you've taught, I know you teach piano firsthand. I think you teach a little guitar. Is that right? Or have taught?
I have given a couple of students that don't even know what the strings are.
Yeah.
But
Like
I would turn them over in about 3 weeks to a real guitar teacher.
Mm-hmm. And then you do theory.
I'll teach theory and I'll teach composition.
Yeah.
Most of the composition teaching I've had to do mainly revolves around songwriting.
Okay.
I'm not getting too many people going, let's go through that Beethoven chord structure on the, on this piece. And, we could do that, but,
right.
Most people want to be able to write a song,
mm-hmm.
or at least have the tools to write one.
Right. Not interested in scholarly dissections
exactly.
of existing stuff. Yeah. Gotcha. So that's a pretty broad range in terms of what you can teach and where, how you can, and it reflects your experience. We've looked back, over the decades, just in this conversation, you can see why you're able to teach each different type of thing you're able to teach and why you're able to relate to the different kinds of people you are, because you do.
No, thank you. I also do teach a little bit of production. I do teach production.
Oh, right. Yeah. Don't leave that out.
Because nowadays, and I don't mean this to sound bitter, but it's like everybody that has a computer and a digital audio workstation thinks they're a producer. And that's not what being a producer, making a drum beat is not being a producer.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like back in the day when you made movies with a high 8, that's not making that doesn't make you a director. Making movies with a home video camera doesn't make you a director.
It kind of could nowadays.
Yeah. So,
But yeah, I see your point.
but what does that? I mean, what is the difference?
The difference is, knowing what sounds work together. What,
Mhm.
there's the old school producer, which I'm kind of in that. I came up through 24 tracks, so I kind of can put myself in that OG category.
Mhm.
You know, you had to be able to write for strings, or if you wanted a string arrangement on your piece, or
Right.
a horn section, come up with horn parts and be able to communicate those. You had to be able to communicate with musicians.
Mm.
Everything is so solitary now. You can
Got
hear it in so much of the music that's out there now. It's one person playing everything. They're arranging everything, so they don't have that sense of what happens when two people get in a room,
Right.
and what happens when a third person comes in, or a fourth, or 10.
Mm-hmm.
It's a magical experience. You cannot even you can't even explain that.
Yeah. And there's physics behind that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have my little theory about singers.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to a lot of older records, when you solo out the voice, there's some pitchiness going on.
Mm-hmm.
When you put everything in, you don't hear it. Why? Because string players tend to play sharp. Horn players tend to be a little on the flatter side.
Mm-hmm.
The rhythm section is hearing all this and working together and this is all done on a very subconscious level.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm playing piano and I hear a guitar, that their string is a little sharp, I'm going to make sure maybe my voicing is not going to augment that sound.
Yeah.
And this is all very quick mental calculations that are going on with musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's all said and done, there's some headroom for a singer to be sharp at times or flat, because music should breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And it should be elastic. Not everything has to be done on a grid at, boom, 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 boom. Every beat has to, people don't play that way.
Mm-hmm.
When a drummer plays, when he goes to the chorus, he's going to get that tom fill, and it's going to pick that tempo up just a smidge.
Mm.
And when he gets ready to bring that verse in, and then he's back into his groove. That's that elasticity.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get that when you're programming.
Right. Yeah, I like the way you talked about breathing and elasticity, because it gives you that sort of feeling of not openness, but sort of flexibility.
Yeah, and it gives the artist, and it gives all the other musicians choices.
That's it.
It comes back to choices.
Yeah, it's the name of the game. So with the production teaching, you're teaching not just press this button here, move this, slide this thing, use this effect, whatever. Your style of teaching is also helping people think about the choices they're making, about
yes.
how to put things together. What are you hearing? And those sorts of things as well.
Right. And there's just, there's a lot of tricks that we pick up over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a little thing that I do that I learned off of a Quincy Jones record. I forget the name of the song. It was on the Juke Joint album, I think.
Oh.
And at the end of the song, the choir is singing,
mm-hmm.
but as they fade out the choir, you can hear the choir reciting the words. at the same rhythm. So like if it's there's a change coming over me, underneath that you hear there's a change coming over me. And so you get as many stacks of that and you blend that together.
Yeah.
To almost where it's imperceptible that you're hearing anyone speak the part.
Yeah.
But it elevates that background vocal to this ungodly,
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. That's wow. I wonder where that came from. I wonder what led him to that.
I don't know.
As a choice. That's amazing.
It's just like when I was studying Prince records.
Mm.
Now, one of the things I do tell producers to do, if you have a record that you like, duplicate it.
Mm-hmm.
And duplicate every single thing you hear. And one of the things I used to hear on Prince records was when he had a kick drum, he'd put a tambourine on that kick.
Okay.
So that the tambourine would hit where the kick drum hits.
Right.
It just gives the kick drum a little more presence. It's almost imperceptible. Again, it's almost, you have to really listen for it.
Right.
But on a lot of his stuff, you can hear it.
Huh.
So part of that came from learning other people's production styles. And I mean, really sitting down and duplicating it. And I think because coming up in bands and playing live, you always had to learn somebody's parts.
Right.
And because there's nothing more I hate than going to see, if it's a cover band, play the song as is. That, I think it's great that, you can get that little finger in there like I was talking about earlier, but learn the guy's part first before you start making up your own. Mm-hmm. Know where they were coming from, because there's a reason why that record was so good.
Yeah. It's kind of like knocking down the walls inside a house to remodel it before you find out which ones are load bearing.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, you sound like you've done that before.
Oh man, do you have is there a sort of, when you think about your production style, and how you develop that, where do you see it going in the future? Like, how do you continue to evolve? What new things are you kind of building into your production style?
Wow. I've had to get to the point where, I rely more and more on the computer, and because big studios are gone. Right. So you kind of do have to work with the tools that you're given. And I like that because it is a different way to produce. But I still like to add players to anything. Like, we all know I've been doing my album for 15 years now. The pandemic being locked down brought it closer to fruition. Yeah. And one of the things I've been doing is bringing in live players. And it makes all the difference in the world, because now I have other people I'm interacting with. I've even gone back and changed my parts based on what someone else is doing. That's part of the reason why it takes so long. But, that's just fact, Right. And, we've just gotten out of the habit of playing together. Yeah. And I want to see more of that. So most of the projects I choose now, a couple of years ago, I finished up an album by a singer-songwriter, and it was essentially a rock record, which I had never done before. Wow. But it's music, first and foremost. But it had live drummers, guitar player, lots of guitars. I had never recorded that many guitars in my life. Yeah. And I learned something from that, So, and now it looks like I have a jazz record coming up where we're going to be able to use actual string players. So I get to do string arrangements
Nice.
and things like that. So I don't know if my style has changed so much or even evolved, because I'm still coming from, I'm that kid that's listening to your band in the garage going, hey, I like that song. I don't like that song. He shouldn't sing that. Why don't you sing that?
Right.
That just has always been my approach. Just if I can make a record that I like, I'm sure there are going to be,
somebody else is going to like it too.
Other people are going to like it too.
Yeah. And it sounds like what evolves is your toolkit. You're adding more computer to it. You've got this
It's
network of
hybrid.
Yeah, exactly. More of a hybrid model.
That's choices.
More choices.
It's like an artist that paints. You're not going to sit there and just use green or just red. You're going to mix all those colors up. That's what's going to make your art interesting.
Right.
I know people aren't going to go back to putting a band in a big studio and spending, hours and hours getting things right. Those days are gone. You might have a few people here and there that will kind of continue working that way.
Right. Just for the nostalgia.
Yeah, but it's actually kind of nice to be at somebody's home where it's less intimidating. You actually have a better, because I've told you I have red light fever. So I would never put myself on anything I produce. I might do an overdub, but I am not playing on that track, because as soon as that red light hit, I'd be like, I don't know how to play piano anymore. And I might 2 minutes before there be sitting there playing all this great stuff. Yeah. And everybody's going, yeah, that's going to be great.
Yeah.
No, don't know how to do it now.
Yeah, that's gone. All that's gone.
Yeah. And, and I do that even playing live. I have pretty bad stage fright. I get over it by first, second song.
Yeah.
But,
you got to ease into it.
Yeah, it's nerve wracking.
Oh yeah. Oh, I can relate to that.
You've played in bands before.
Yeah. It's these are strangers, and you have no idea what they're.
And you're up there going, "Hey, dig me."
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So as you look ahead, you're talking about gigs and and looking forward. What are the future? What's the future looking like? I know there's an album coming out.
There's Muse Cafe is going to make it out one of these days.
Love it.
I'm actually shooting for a fourth quarter 2021, maybe 2022 first quarter. Worst case scenario.
That's exciting.
I have to get it done. It's been a concept in my head since like 2005, 2006.
Yeah.
And the music's been written for years now. So I really haven't, I've only think out of the dozen or so things on there, I think I've only written maybe one new piece over that time. It's my approach to producing the record. And the sad thing is if this was someone else's record, I would have had you finish it within, I don't think I've ever spent more than 3 months on a record, getting it from let's get the songs together to, all right, we just sent it to mastering.
Wow.
That singer-songwriter album I was telling you about took years. But there were some health issues with him involved, and so that that's what it is.
Yeah.
But being my own producer, I am a world-class procrastinator, and I really do well under pressure. And we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
And if you don't give me a timeline to do something and be in a position where you can enforce that timeline.
Right. That's a
You know, you could tell me, all right, Buzz, I need you to have your record done by October 1st.
right.
That means nothing to me.
You're right.
You know,
Okay, whatever.
Jared wants to hear my record. Okay. But, you know, and it doesn't even seem to work with the record label, you know, asking me. But, you know, I'm cool with them.
Yeah.
And they've got plenty of other stuff to go with.
Yeah.
But it is a project I want to get done.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd love to hear it. That's yeah, I'm excited. I'm just glad to hear you say fourth quarter 2021. That was exciting to hear.
It's really close.
Yeah,
it really is. There's maybe the big hang up for me right now are there's a few songs that I have to play my solos on, and not playing. I don't have flow right now.
Oh, right.
So I'm tending to write them, and I find that, you know, there used to be this guy, well, he's still around, Diodato, and he was an arranger / pianist, and he would write his solos, but he would write enough of his solos and fill in the gaps.
Okay.
I haven't got to the point where I can fill in those gaps yet. So, because I don't want to have a completely structured solo.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, you want it to sound.
I want myself to sound like, you know, he knows what he's doing. Everything else is good, and this is why I'm bringing other people in, because I don't need to be the feature guy on everything. You know.
Oh, interesting.
So that and more teaching, some, you know, other production, just, you know, the usual stuff. Just I think touring and gigging are on the very back shelf now.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
You know.
Yeah.
I'm getting too
given
old
where
for
we are.
that.
It's a tough life, you know. At
People
any
don't
age.
realize how grueling, even if I go to Japan for a week, how tough it can be, because you're all of a sudden your body clock is 14 hours into the future. So you don't sleep.
Right.
And you're not there long enough to get on a sleep schedule.
Nope.
And you're having to do these shows, you're having to go to sound check, you're having to, you know, have rehearsals. It's tough. It's fun,
tough.
but it's tough at the same time.
Yeah. It's an investment.
Yeah, it's not all glitz and glamour, like, you know, even when you go out with the biggies, it's just as grueling, maybe even more.
Yeah, there's always a reality behind all the shine. Yeah. Cool. Are you do you have any I always ask this question on my show. You know what I'm about to ask. Do you have any advice now that we've seen your evolution from the 3-year-old in the rocking chair all the way up to the, you know, teacher, producer,
the
writer,
68-year-old in the rocking chair.
rocking chair to rocking chair. You know, taking us through that was amazing. I learned a lot, and I feel like I know you pretty well.
You do.
So you know, that those 6 decades of music, you know, do you have any advice for people or nuggets that you've kind of encapsulated from that?
I think the as much as you can learn about music, the best piece of advice that was ever given to me was given to me by a guitar player, the great Pat Martino. And we were talking, and I saw a set of his at a club here in town called EJ's years ago. And I talked to him at the bar, And, we talked about all kinds of stuff, but basically he got down to learn everything you can about music and then forget it. And, my 25-year-old self couldn't digest that then. But I eventually came to understand what he was getting at. And I think it holds true. You should try and get as many musical experiences under your belt. If you can sing, go out and don't just go out and do karaoke. Go to find one, like there's some karaoke places that have live bands that play.
Oh, wow.
Or go to a live group and say, can I sit in? If you can really sing, because they frown on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if performing is what you want to do, then get out there and perform. You're gonna screw up. You're gonna sound like, horrible on some nights, and you're gonna amaze yourself on other nights.
Yeah.
But be open to all that. Don't be up there playing and going, man, I'm going to impress that girl in that front row, man. She's looking. If you do that, you're signing your death warrant. Just be in the moment. So take as many experiences as you can. Learn as much as you can, whether it's production or writing or whatever, and then just do it, and do it daily, do it religiously, and don't ever stop learning.
That's great advice. That is great advice. And you can see all of that. You're not just making this up. You can see all of that in your journey, all the new tools you've learned, picked up, all the instruments and the, different aspects of music that you've absorbed. So you walk your talk.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I would like to point out to our listeners that Jared here has a podcast entitled "What is Innovation?"
Oh yeah, thank you.
And I have the pleasure most times of editing his podcast, and which is one of the reasons why I picked Jared to do this for us this evening, because he's very easygoing, he has a great personality, he asks good questions, he listens well. His podcast, when I first heard about it, I was like, okay, so this is, more about business and whatever. But I have learned so much from the various people you've had as guests. I encourage everybody to listen to it, because we need innovation in music, in music technology.
Yeah.
I actually did one on your one of your episodes as well.
Great episode.
But people should tune in. You can listen to it on all the major, Spotify, Apple.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
What is Innovation? With your host, Jared Simmons.
Thank you, Buzz. Thanks for that.
No, thank you.
I appreciate everything you do for the show and for my musical education. So it was a pleasure to be able to chat with you again, and some other people just happen to be listening in this time.
Yeah. Well, let's hope.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us this evening. Usually I play us in and play us out with a song by the special guest. So I guess I'll play something I've done.
There you go.
To tag this out. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and see you next Monday and Thursdays, 8 p.m.